Drinking life from a fire hose, it seems sometimes. Sound familiar? This is life in the A.S.A.P lane. If you're feeling anxious, stressed, addicted, pressured, you are not alone. In fact, there's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. Many aren't able to cope without the use of pills, alcohol, food, even retail therapy, shopping. The result is record levels of opioid overdose deaths, obesity levels, and teen suicide attempts. The good news is, there is an exit ramp, and your host, best-selling author, and former U.S. Congressman Alan Steelman will guide you to your very own exit. Alan's mission is to help you learn about and adopt strategies and techniques to restore balance and equilibrium to your life. You'll learn from Alan and his guests simple and practical stress-relieving techniques, and you will be inspired by numerous interviews with other people just like you, who have moved from stressed out to charged up, and from misery to mastery. You are cordially invited to join us and learn to live your life in joy and on purpose. Take a deep breath. Let's begin exiting the A.S.A.P lane with Alan.
Hi, this is Alan Steelman, and I wanted to take this opportunity to let you know about an exciting new podcast series that I am launching, and I'm particularly excited about the two guests today. This is the introductory version or episode, and in my book I talk about the magic in our brains. Actually, I call it being born with a Walgreen or a CVS in our brain. And I'm here today at the Center for Brain Health and the Brain Performance Institute at the University of Texas at Dallas. And my two guests, Dr. Diana Purvis Jaffin, who's in charge of strategy and programs, and Dr. Jenny Howland, who's in charge of stress reduction programs, will talk about the magic in the brain. And I hope you will listen in, because this is truly the path to exiting the A.S.A.P lane and all the damage being done to our mental and our physical health. Please join us. Welcome everyone to this very first episode with guests of Exiting the A.S.A.P lane. The title of today's episode, as you can see from the introduction, is The Magic in the Brain, the Walgreens in your head that probably many of you were not even aware you were born with. I certainly wasn't. I outlined the message and the mission of the program in an earlier episode. We are living our lives in the midst of a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. My two guests today are Dr. Diana Purvis Jaffin and Dr. Jennifer Howland of the esteemed Brain Performance Institute at the University of Texas at Dallas. Dr. Purvis Jaffin is Director of Programs and Strategy at the Institute, and Dr. Howland is Director of Stress Solutions. They are doing groundbreaking work at the Institute in a number of areas, and that's what we will explore in today's program. The damage to our collective mental and physical health is enormous. It is said by many scientists and doctors that upward to 95% of physical illness is attributable to undigested stress. Events in our lives, including traumas that become emotional knots and take a major toll on our bodies and brains. Tragically, in an increasing number of cases, it is becoming fatal due to the inability of many to cope with the pace of life without destructive forms of self-medication like pills and alcohol and binge eating, even shopping, retail therapy. For example, more were lost to opioid overdoses last year alone than in the combined wars of Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The obesity rate is soaring. 4 out of 10 Americans now have a body mass index that ranks them as obese. America ranks second only to Mexico on the planet, with its obesity rate. Teen suicide attempts are on the rise. However, there is good news amidst all this. There is an exit ramp, and you can take that exit, and you and me need to take that exit in order to restore emotional and mental balance to our lives. The good news is your happiness does depend on drugs, the magic 4 that God gave us all at birth. And my guests today are going to explain the magic, and may I add that neither go by the name of Mandrake, as in Mandrake the magician, or David Copperfield, or have any rabbits to pull out of hats. This is magic backed by science, and this is what we will explore today. Welcome, Diana, and welcome, Jenny, and thanks very much for being willing to participate in this podcast. So, let's open with You know, some wise person once said that brevity is next to godliness, and I've seen you all summarize this as be active, eat well, and just be present. So could you elaborate a bit on that?
Alan, that's just a wonderful way to frame it. Here at Brain Performance Institute, we really take pride in understanding that we are holistic human beings. We are not just a brain on top of a body or a separate collection of systems that make us stress. And the best way to deal with stress in any form is to think about our whole beings, to stay fit, to stay healthy, to eat well, eat real food, make sure you get good restorative sleep, and have strong relationships in your life. These are all things that are strongly written about in the scientific literature as being components that build resilience.
Okay, very good. Jenny, I know you deal a lot, as both of you do, but you in particular in the whole area of mindfulness. This is a term that's used largely as an umbrella term to include certainly yoga and meditation and perhaps other things, but could you give us just an easy definition of what mindfulness means and talk a little bit about how someone can utilize that in their own life to deal with the stress and anxiety and the pressure of life today?
Absolutely. So kind of the traditional definition of mindfulness is being present in a particular way without judgment, elaboration, or reactivity, which sounds easy in theory, but as humans, we're rarely doing that. How often are we just in a situation or in a conversation, in a meeting, wherever we are, and we're thinking about something else, or thinking about our grocery list, or maybe an argument that we had with our spouse earlier? Being present is one of the key factors in bringing joy and happiness to our life. So the term mindfulness, like you said, is kind of an umbrella term. So there's really two different ways to train mindfulness. And one of those ways is formal practice, which is what you're talking about, mindful movement, such as Tai Chi and Qigong, those sorts of things, and meditation, like formal meditation. There's also informal practices, which are just being present in your life, truly experiencing and savoring a meal or being present in a conversation.
Well, it's difficult. That's really, as simple as it sounds, one of life's greatest challenges, because we're all born with this monkey brain, as someone described it, where we're constantly ruminating about mistakes from the past, worries about tomorrow, and keeping that monkey under control is really what Be Here Now is all about.
Absolutely.
And again, as simple as it sounds, it's one of life's greatest challenge. Could you talk a little bit about what mindfulness is not? Because there are some who, given the stereotypes that many of us have about this, who may not understand exactly what it is and, more importantly, what it is not.
Well, mindfulness is not a religion. So that's interesting. A lot of times people think that it's a religion, but it's actually not. It truly is just about being present. It's not, as Diana mentioned, it's not the only way we can build resilience and be a holistic human being. It is a very strongly researched and evidence-based way that we can build resilience, but it's not the only way. And then it's not a quick fix. It's kind of like one of those things where you get out what you put in, like the gym. You can have a gym membership, but if you don't go and you don't use it, you're not going to get any fitter. It's the same way with meditation and mindfulness. Just because you want to be mindful doesn't mean you're actually being mindful and practicing what we preach.
Diana, you mentioned earlier about us being whole. I don't remember exactly what term you used, but I think what you were saying is we are body, mind, and spirit.
We are.
And Patanjali wrote 2,500 years ago, and he was one of the first ones to write about this topic, that the purpose of yoga was to calm the agitations of the mind. And we've got a stereotype, certainly in the West, that it's more a physical regimen, when it's really more focused on us getting that monkey under control. So could you elaborate a bit on body, mind, and spirit, and how going beyond just the physical benefits of a mindfulness practice can benefit someone?
I will. Patanjali wrote years ago about yoga, and many may not know that yoga has many arms to it, many branches of practice, of which the physical part is only one half of yoga. And there are others that are centered around breath practices and how you use your mind in a very ancient form that still applies today. So it's really fascinating to realize how much taking care of your physical being, staying fit, improves the ability to tame the monkey, because it sharpens your stress response, your ability to calm down. And the thing that we really love teaching about mindfulness as a particular practice is that it creates space. It can create a bit of quiet, even if it's microseconds, kind of like Dan Harris has described it as a waterfall coming down and that space between the cliff and the waterfall. If you engage in these practices, you start to calm the monkey enough to create little choice points throughout your day where you can respond rather than react. I can be sitting in a meeting where someone is just majorly annoying me and come back to that place of calm, being present and truly trying to understand that individual and be thoughtful in my responses. We can do this at work. We can do this with our families. We can do this to build very strong families and community relationships that all feed into making us more resilient. Because after all, being resilient is about building capacity to withstand life stressors. So when we combine the full spectrum of movement, eating well, sleeping well, strong relationships, practicing mindfulness in whatever form may appeal to you, we create this quiet space in our mind where we can be more thoughtful and responsive rather than reactive.
Well, that's a really important point because it doesn't, a mindfulness practice does not change the external events in any of our lives, but it does provide us a way to deal more rationally with these events. I think that's what you were saying. And someone has described it as equipping us with a surfboard. You know, we all have, many of our days are, the seas are peaceful. Some days the water is choppy, and we all deal with a few tsunamis in our life.
That's right.
And having a surfboard to surf not only the choppy seas, but the tsunamis, I think, is another way to think about how this can be employed in someone's life.
Well, along with that, again, it comes back to the only thing we can control is ourselves. We can't control all those external events. So if we change our expectation on that and seek for an inner calm and just a calm, composed being, we're going to be a lot more successful in life, and we're going to feel better. We're going to stop those energy drains from that monkey mind and that reactiveness.
Right. Jenny, you mentioned it not being a religion. Let's dwell on that for just a moment, because this does come up from time to time. And, I've thought about this a lot, and being body, mind, and spirit, as we all are, the stupid things that I've done in my life, and I got angry or jealous, or somebody cut me off in traffic, or gave me the one-finger Boy Scout salute out there at their window, my reaction to that has come out of this mind, not my spirit, but out of an agitated mind, and I get angry at something like that. And the Dalai Lama said that if we could teach every 8-year-old to meditate, we could heal the planet of violence in one generation. And I think what he was saying is, calming the monkey and letting the spirit do its work. The spirit is where empathy and gratitude and joy and all the good qualities that we're all born with reside. And if we can just keep the mind under control, the spirit can do its work, and we'll, I think, deal with life much more rationally. And so, what I say in the book is that mindfulness is the best friend of any priest, rabbi, minister, imam, because they're all dealing with what the mind is causing their congregations to do. And if they can just let the spirit do its work, things will be a whole lot better.
Yeah, and I think another really interesting thing to think about if we talk about mind, body, spirit, physical health, all of that sort of thing, when we build our resilience and we have that space, that choice point that Diana was talking about, when it comes to spirit, we become more tolerant of other people. Like you said, maybe we're not honking and screaming at people on the freeway. We allow ourselves to really let our spirit come through. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, shifting to something that is an important problem, not only in Dallas, Texas, but nationally, is the whole issue of first responders and the anxious and stressful lives that they lead in their jobs of protecting us from, in the case of the police, one type of event, and firemen from another type of event. And I know you are doing a lot of work with first responders here at the Institute, and have a lot of evidence already to show that it is really very beneficial to policemen and firemen. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Diana and I work very, very closely with the Dallas Police Department with our mindfulness program. So just a little bit of history. After the events of 7/7 here in Dallas, downtown Dallas, 5 police officers were shot and killed. And after that event, there was a donor that came forward to us at the Center for Brain Health, Brain Performance Institute and said, we have to do something to help these officers. And so Diana at the time went and looked at all the literature, because everything we do is scientifically based, and said we can create a mindfulness program for them and make this something that can really be beneficial to them. So I came on board with her team, and she and I developed this program for the Dallas Police Department, which we have some amazing data with. We've shown statistically significant improvements, and that just means, for those of you that don't know, that just means it's likely not due to anything other than the program. It's not just a placebo effect. In organizational police stress, which is kind of all of the red tape and the pensions and the moving shifts and all of that kind of aspects of police work, as well as in mindfulness in the areas of non-judgment and non-reactivity. And if you think about, like, in the days of body cams and cell phones and faces and whatnot, that's huge in a police officer, as well as really good data, really good trends in decision-making improvements and overall global health. So that's emotional health, physical health, sleep, pain, fatigue, all of those sorts of things. And it's just been a phenomenal project. And we love our data, but Diana and I frequently hear feedback from these officers on just how it's improved their lives and how it's changed the way they interact with their children and people on the streets and whatnot.
You know, as stressful as it must be responding to a 911 call saying somebody's got a gun and please report to a certain address, I've heard you all in the past talk about the stress of dealing with the paperwork, the bureaucracy, am I going to get home safely tonight, all those things that I wouldn't even think about as a civilian, as it were. Could you talk a little bit about what they've told you about dealing with that side of their life and how this helps them deal with that?
Yes, as Jenny just mentioned, one of the findings from our pilot data was that officers were reporting that they felt less stressed due to organizational stressors. And we used a questionnaire specific to police culture. So what this tells us is that they're creating those choice points where they are able to choose not to drain their energy in frustration, anger, anxiety over organizational stressors that they can't control. So that was huge, because that contributes to a peace of mind and well-being and calming that monkey mind that you talked about earlier. So we were very excited about that finding. But even beyond the data, they're coming into class and telling us, I didn't use my sleep meds this week for the first time in a very long time. Or I did a body scan with my wife, she was stressed and hasn't been able to sleep and she fell right asleep. Or, Jenny, I'm doing this with my kids at night and it's brought us closer together. So we find that there's a ripple effect to help start to strengthen families and improve the brain health and stress response of their children and families. It's just the feedback goes on, and we could not be more pleased that we're having a positive impact with them.
Yeah, great. Dinah, you mentioned earlier, without calling it the 6 pillars of well-being, you sort of articulated what those were. Talk a bit about sleep deprivation and diet in particular, because the obesity rate, as we referenced earlier, is a huge, huge problem here and taking an enormous toll on our physical health. So to talk about those two, if you would, for a moment.
Happy to. As you know, that's one of my favorite topics. As both an exercise physiologist and a neuroscientist, if you're not covering the basics in your life, that's what's going to have the biggest impact on your quality of life, your well-being, your brain health, your propensity later in life to get dementia or Alzheimer's. And it's like a triad. In the military, we call it a performance triad. You have to eat well, you have to move your body, and you have to sleep well. And those are the basics. Think of a pyramid. Those are the basics of the pyramid. But yet we know that, according to public health data, most people are not attending well. And I know you said particularly diet and sleep, but you can't talk about those without physical activity in the age of obesity. It's so important that we move our bodies. That is just the most major effect on your brain and that pharmacy in your head to upregulate, to increase amounts of chemicals in your brain that make you feel good, that improve your mood. And there's a synergistic effect when you combine that with a really good diet that includes a lot of plant foods, healthy fats, lean proteins, and just lots of fruits and vegetables. It's so powerful for your brain. And then sleep. We have studies showing that when you're sleep impaired, it can be equivalent to being intoxicated. It slows your reaction time. It makes you make stupid decisions and not perform well. And this game of life is about performing, whether you're at work or you're at home. And we often talk about you can use these things synergistically along with managing your stress to perform better. Both at work and at home. And that's what we want, is well-being and optimal lives where we're not just consumed by stress in the fast lane.
One really important thing that I've heard you all talk about and I've read about is when we're constantly and chronically stressed, which most of us are these days in this A.S.A.P lane in which we live our lives, the constant carpet bombing of cortisol to the remainder of our body organs. We don't, I certainly never did until recently, connect what's going on in my head with what's going on in my gut and other parts of my body. But I'd ask you to elaborate a bit on how the enormous toll chronic stress can take on your lungs, heart, liver, colon, the rest of your body due to the cortisol bombardment that is being caused in your life by stress and anxiety.
Well, cortisol is a really important stress hormone. We need it to function, we need it to fight infection, and it's a component of our immune system as well. The problem is when we're constantly and chronically stressed. In the old days, if a tiger chased you, you had a stress response called the fight or flight that mobilized your energy sources so you could either fight that tiger or run away. But our bodies have not really changed over the last millions of years, and when we're stuck in traffic and want to give that Boy Scout salute or rage at someone, we're getting the same internal response without the opportunity to run away or fight and dissipate and use up those stress hormones. So when they hang out in the body for extended periods of time, they wreak havoc. They promote that you can gain belly fat, which is more deadly for heart disease and metabolic disorders. And of course, belly fat may contribute to adult type 2 diabetes. None of this is good long-term for your brain. It shrinks key areas in your brain that are related to memory and learning. And also because the effects of these stress hormones hang out in your body for quite a while. And this is part of what can disrupt sleep at night, when you're constantly releasing them and they're hanging out in the body. So it's so important, and this is what we teach people, is to manage your physiology. And you do that by taking care of the fundamentals, like we talked about, the triad: eat well, move, and sleep well. And then couple that with managing your stress physiology in whichever way will end up working for you. You do that, you're going to be one sharp human being, feeling good, happy, joyful, and able to manage your responses to life.
And so that's the way to access the Walgreens in our head.
That is the way to access the Walgreens in your head.
Right.
You have to eat well, move your body, sleep well, and manage your stress.
So those four feel-good chemicals are oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin, if I remember correctly.
Right, and there are others. Those are some of the key ones,
Right.
but you can affect them, the levels of them, dramatically by taking care of your human being system.
Right.
And when you don't take care of your human being system and you let stress come in and be chronic, it actually can reduce some of those feel-good neurotransmitters and reward center neurotransmitters as well.
Okay. Let's talk about people who work in offices and sit at desks all day long and spend their lives dealing in customer service centers, call centers, and having to spend their days over computers. Talk about some things that they can do at work each day, during the day, to help deal with stress and anxiety and pressure.
Well, number one thing you can do is not stay seated 100% of the time. If you're at a place where you can, even if you're in like cubicles or a large setting with lots of desks, if you can stand up and sit down. So make sure that you move regularly and change your body position. Get a standing desk if you can and use that part of the day. They're rather inexpensive. And you also want to just make sure that you take breathing breaks. The fundamentals of all the stress management physiology we teach are to use your breath. Deep breathing is calming to the nervous system and can sort of help reset a stress response and get you back to an even keel. Of course, pack your own lunch. Don't eat junk food, fast food. We teach people to food prep their food, some on the weekend, so they have easy access to readily cooked food during the week without relying on fast food, processed foods, and those kinds of things. So those are a few strategies that I myself use, and any opportunity I can, I walk to the office down the hall rather than sending an email so I can get a few steps in. Fitbit devices that we wear on our arms can be really helpful to help you maintain a certain level of activity by just walking. Make sure you walk more often. Take the stairs when you can. Don't get the first parking spot. Park a little further away. All of these micro practices add up to more activity. And activity is the name of the game if you sit all day in an office or a call center or customer service. Now, for those engaged in customer service, that can be a little bit stressful,
Yes.
I would imagine.
Yes.
And that's when we start to teach some breathing techniques and some heart-focused techniques that can shift your physiology in the moment and make you feel better so that you can remain calm and composed even if someone's yelling at you. So that we
Yes.
teach these kinds of practices. So those are some things you can do in an office setting.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about, Yoga Journal says that there are approximately 40 million practitioners of yoga and meditation in a country of 320 million. And these are largely white females who can afford to pay for yoga instruction. So that's 12% of the population in a country in the midst of this global epidemic of stress. So men, for example, who tend to think, well, it's not macho enough, I need to be in the gym lifting weights and getting on that treadmill, or I can't do what the women can do, I can't do those pretzel-type contortions, and I'll be embarrassed if I go. Seniors who think I'm too old, stressed out teens who have not much time on their hands due to all the social media they're engaging in, and African Americans and Hispanics who may feel that no one like me does yoga. But let's talk about men in particular. Now, Jenny, I know that in spite of this stereotype, there are some of the most, quote, macho professions on the planet, the military, the Navy SEALs, and other of the elite military squads, policemen, firemen, championship sports teams, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, last year's NBA champions, the Golden State Warriors, LeBron James, numerous baseball pitchers have talked about the need to not only be bigger, better, faster, stronger, but that the real competitive edge comes in being able to calm the mind when 100,000 people are screaming at you in a stadium. So I know with the first responders, you in particular are working with men who are very macho, but they've also discovered the need. And your own husband, for example, both of you have military backgrounds with either husbands or children. So could you talk a little bit about men and the need to get over this stereotype and to start thinking about mindfulness?
Well, absolutely. I mean, just as you were saying, we've worked with about 150 police officers that maybe came in not necessarily thinking this was something for them and have left just expounding the benefits of how much this can be helpful. And you're right, some of these men and women they're not hippies in robes and singing with bowls and whatnot. I mean, they're normal human beings with, like you said, very, very tough jobs. And my own husband as well does yoga and practices meditation, having been in the Air Force for 19 and a half years. So it's hugely beneficial. It's a stereotype that doesn't really need to exist.
Yeah. Just thinking about these athletes, for example, so in the social media age in which we live, they not only have to perform well on the field, but they also have a life outside the lines where they're being criticized on talk radio, being criticized in social media. And these are young 20-somethings usually. I can't imagine having to deal with that when I was that age as an athlete. And you can also even apply that analogy to all of our lives. We go to work, we have a life inside the lines, and many of us perform pretty well at work, and then we go home and oh my God, we're mad at our spouse, we're screaming at our children, we're overeating, we're getting an early 5 o'clock shot of vodka out of a bottle and whatever to try to cope. So we all have lives outside the lines as well, just like these championship athletes do. So I think a good way for all of us who might be thinking about our own lives and whether we should start engaging in a mindfulness practice is to reflect on not only our life at work. Diana was talking about some things we can do at work, but how do we behave at home and with our loved ones?
Well, I think it's important to go back to what Diana mentioned earlier when it comes to capacity for resilience. And what we mean by that, and she talked about plugging some of those energy drains. Like if you think about our ability to be resilient, we only have so much ability in a given day. And some days we have more than others. Maybe we got better sleep. Maybe we ate better that day. But you can think about it like a battery, an inner battery. And if you go about your day and you just let everything drain that battery down, 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 and you don't do anything, like Diana mentioned, get up, take a break, deep breathe. If you don't do anything to recharge that battery, you're right. By the time you get home, you're done, you're out. And that is when you scream at the kids or tell the dog to go away and whatever.
Right.
And so you have to do some of these practices to charge up that battery, or it just keeps draining down.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been a great session. I want to thank you all again for participating. And I want to ask all listeners who might be interested in learning more about the Center for Brain Health and the Brain Performance Institute to go to their website. There's a lot of valuable information there. And I want to also remind you, as I do at the end of each episode, to go to alansteelman.net. There are more resources there. And as you may remember, the whole thesis in the book that I've written is that there is an exit ramp, the yellow brick road, your breath, a mindfulness practice that will allow you to get that monkey under control and to reach your very own Emerald City, a calm mind, where troubles do drop like lemon drops and the birds are always singing and the sky's always blue. And don't be depending on those false wizards. You remember the wizard turned out to be a wrinkled up little old man, and that's the same thing that pills and alcohol and all these other things that we use to cope with are. So thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you at the next episode.